We're up to Daf Ayin Ches Amid Beis. Hai Kra. This pasuk in Yechezkel is a tema gedola. Why? Reisha, it says Lo Yikulem Noshin Ki Besulos is referring to a Kohen Gadol. He's allowed to marry only a Besula. V'Seifa, but the end of the pasuk says Almana Shatia Almana Mikohen Yikachu, that they're allowed to marry an Almana, which means Kohen Hedjot. So how could it be that one pasuk is split into two? We have a precedent. It's not the only time that you split up a pasuk between the beginning of the pasuk and the end of the pasuk. And because of Kohachi, I'll prove it to you from a pasuk in Shmuel Aleph Per Gimel. It says, "V'ner Elokim terem yichbe u'Shmuel shoche beheichal Hashem." This makes no sense because it can't be that Shmuel is shoche beheichal Hashem, because the heichal in the Mishkan of Shiloh is halo. We have a principle in Sanhedrin Kuf Aleph, ein yeshiv bazor lemalchei beis bilvad. So since Shmuel was not a melech, he had no right to to sit in the heichal of the Mishkan of Shiloh. Ela, but rather we have to split the pasuk right down the middle. Ner Elokim terem yichbe beheichal Hashem. That's where the menorah stood with the Ner Tamid in the heichal Hashem. U'Shmuel shoche b'mkomo, and Shmuel is sleeping or sitting in his base mishmar, which was called the base mishmar halavim. So therefore, we have a precedent where a mikra, a pasuk, can be divided into two parts. Gemara now continues with the pasuk in Yechezkel. It says, "Almana shertia almana mikohen yikachu," meaning that only an almana is alma lo mikohen. But if she was a Salma Yisrael, then he's not allowed to marry her. We're talking about a regular Kohen. How could that be? A Kohen Hedjit doesn't have any azhara to marry an almana. Here's what the pasuk means: Mikohen yikachu is somebody mishar hakohenim. That's not a Kohen Gadol. Yikachu, those women can be married to. In other words, the pasuk is saying v'almana shatia almana, even if she's from Yisrael, and Mikohen yikachu, any of the Kohenim who's not a Kohen Gadol is allowed to marry her. Tanya nami hochi mikohen yikachu mishar kohenim yikachu. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, here's an alternative interpretation of the pasuk. Min hamasim lekuhuni yikachu. Someone who's roy to marry off his daughter to Kahuna is they can marry her. And the pasuk is coming to exclude almonas, ger, who's not able to be masi, to marry off his daughter to Kohenim, and his almona is also asura to a Kohen. Rabbi Yehuda l'tameh. Rabbi Yehuda is consistent in his machlokas against the Tanakama. The Omer, it says in the Mishnah back on Daf Ayin Zayin, Bas ger zocher kabas chol zocher. And this is derived from the pasuk in Yechezkel, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Mizera Beis Yisrael. And Rabbi Yehuda interprets it, Sheyeh kol zera Yisrael. And now we understand why he interprets the pasuk in Yechezkel in the Hemshech, that's coming to teach you that so too, posel ager es ha'isha b'biyasa. So not only is the child a chalal or a chalola, but the isha herself, who had this relationship, the mother will call her, with the ger zachar, she also becomes psula b'biyasa, as we discussed earlier, according to Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore, his almana is asur l'kohen, because the principle kol sha'at nose bita to nose almanoso, kol she'iyat nose bito, iyat nose almanoso. The Mishnah records the Shita Rabbi Yossi Omer Af Ker Shenasa Gioris, both parents are Gioris, and yet the Bas is Ksher Lakun Omer Av Hamnuna Mishmeidu La'aloch Rabbi Yossi. According to the strict letter of the law, the halach is like Rabbi Yossi, and a Kohen is allowed to marry the daughter of two Gerim. V'chein Omra Baruch Hanalach Rav Yossi. However, Miyom Shechar Beis Hamikdash Nagu Konim Silsul V'Atzman K'Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov. Silsul means Mila. They sort of elevated their status. They would only marry a girl whose one parent, whether it's the father or the mother, was a ger or a gioris. Rav Nachman Huna ba limlach. If a Kohen comes to ask us a question about which gioris he should marry, is Morin lo Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov to marry a ger, or I should say gioris, whose father or mother, one of the two parents, is a ger, but Nasa, if b'diavad he went ahead and despite our Eitzah, he married a girl both of whose parents are gerim, ein motzino so meimenu ki Reb Yossi, because the halacha fundamentally is like Reb Yossi. This leads us to the Mishnah here in the middle of Ayin Chesamid Beis. Ha'omer b'ni zem mamzer. A man identifies this child that we thought was born to his wife and him, and he says, no, I'm not the father of this child. The child's a mamzer. Eino neman, he's not believed. Afilu shneim modim ala uber shemeya shemamzer. Even if he and she, the father and the mother, both say that this child is a mamzer, and she was nisabra each zar, they're not believed. Eino neman. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he disagrees. Neman. Gemara says, Maya filu shneim. What was the havamina that if both parents testify that this child is a mamzer, maybe we should believe them. I mean, if each parent does not believe, then both parents together are not believed. Lo mi boy kama, lo mi boy ihu. The Gemara, the Mishnah wants to tell me a chiddush that even though the mother, who really can identify who made her pregnant, ihu, if it's the father and he's saying, well, it's not my child, lo kimle, he can't really know for sure, whose zera was responsible for this pregnancy. Again, today we have testing, but el afilu de kimle, she knows for sure, bevados, that she became pregnant from someone else and not from her husband. Lo mehemna, they not believe. So Gemara says that you should know there's an extra chiddush in that Mishnah. V'lo mi boy heicha de islay chezka de kashrus. It goes to that saying that the parents are not believed to establish his psul if the child, has a chezkas kashrus. Like, for example, he was already nolad and he had a chazaka of a vlad kosher. And now they come in and they say, no, he's a mamzer. Delo mehemna, that makes sense. But I want to tell you even a greater chiddush. El afilu ubar nami delesle chezkas de kashrus lo mehemna. Even if she hasn't yet given birth and the baby is only in virtue, in other words, in a pregnancy state, right? In an embryonic state, so the embryo doesn't have a cheskes kashrus yet. Nevertheless, the parents are not believed to establish that this uber, when born, will be a mamzer. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ne'emanim, they are believed. Kedesanya, we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yehuda darshans a pasuk in Dvarim Chaf Aleph. In the parsha of Yerushas Bechor, the Torah says, Ki es ha-bechor ben hasnua yakir lo seis lo pishnayim v'chol she'imotzei lo. And the word yakir here is completely redundant. What do we derive from yakir? Yakiren alacherim. He can walk into Bezdin, and Bezdin has no idea that this is a bechor. This is his oldest son, Peter, and the father identifies him as such. Is the Torah says es ha-bechor ben hasnua yakir. He's believed the father. Mikan, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Neman Adam Lomar Zeb b'ni Bechar. A person is believed to identify this son as his Bechar, and therefore the son will get Pishnayim from the Yerusha. Ukshem sheneman Adam Lomar Zeb b'ni Bechar, Kach Neman Adam Lomar Zeb ben Grusha, Zeb ben Chalutza. A father is believed not only in the positive sense to identify which son, this son as his bechor, he's also neman in a negative sense to say that this son is a ben grusha, meaning I was married to a grusha, and he was born from that marriage, and Memele is a cholol, and he's posel a kahuna, and he's never to say Zeh ben chalutza, which is only a chol d'Rabbanan. So you see that according to Rabbi Yehuda, a father has nemanis to posel his son. And that's derived from the fact that the father has nemanis to identify his son as a bechor. The father is not believed to establish that his son is a ben grusha or a ben chalutza. Amalei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak leRava Bishlema leRav Yehuda. I understand the contrary behind Yakir, and the pasuk is telling me that the father is neman on his son to identify him as a ben grusha and chalutza leRabbanan Yakir lamali. What did the Rabbanan do with the extra word Yakir? And the Gemara answers b'tzarach hakera, where Bezdin doesn't know who is the bechor. Let's say, for example, the bechor shows up from Medina Sayyam. We never knew that he was the bechor. And the Chachama Moda that the father is never to say, this is my bechor. My hilchasa, for what nafkemina laseis lo pishnaim. Frekting mer pshita, the father has a migu. Lamali kra, why do I need a pasuk? Is migu di boy masvile matana milo yahavile. The father has within his potential to give a matana, give away all his nechasim to this one, whether he's a bechor or not a bechor. So certainly he should be believed to say he's a bechor. He was made in Bezdin that this guy is a bechor, and at that point he didn't have nechasim. He only inherited them later on. So therefore the migu falls away. Rabbi Meir Diyama, Rabbi Meir is quoted back on Samach Gimel, Adam Makne Davar Shelo Bali Olam, is Yakir Lamal, meaning he has a migu the father because he can even be makne as a matana nechasim that he doesn't have yet. And the answer shenaflu lokshu goses. The chiddush is that even if the father does not have the ability to be makne his nechasim, because at that moment in time he's a goses, nevertheless, despite the absence of migu, the father has special memonas that's derived from Zeh Bechori, from Yaakov. And now we get to the Mishnah here on the bottom of Ayin Ches Amid Beis. What happens if there were two people who could have been Mekadesh on behalf of the same woman? Misha Nasam Rishus L'Shlucha L'Kadesh is Bito. The father, in the case of Kitano or Nara, gave Rishus to Ploni Almoni, to Kadisha. For Holach, but the father himself decided, hey, I got a good suitor here, a capable candidate, Vakitsha. So who's she married to? Is she married to the man that was appointed by the Shliach, or the man that was the father's? Im Shalo, it depends, Kadmu, which one came first? If the father first was Makabel Kiddush before the Shliach had the possibility of doing so, is then Kiddush of Kiddushin, and the Kiddush Shlichos are not Chal. But Im Shel Shlucho Kadmo, if the Kiddushin of the Shliach came first, is Kiddush of Kiddushin. That Kiddushin is valid because a Shliach can be Makadosh on behalf of the Mishaleh. What do we do in any Yodua? We don't know which of them got there first. So obviously she's going to need a get from both potential Makachim. And that's the Gemara here on Daf Ayin Tesam and Aleph. Shneim Noslim Get. In Ratu Echad Noslim Get, Echad Konis. So if they make an agreement between the two, you know what? You marry her, I'll give a get, and that's fine. Now the Mishnah says, V'cheina Isha. So she appointed a shliach. Then she herself went out and was holcha v'kitchas atzma. Again, the same rules apply. Im shala kadmu is kiddusha kiddusha, and then the shliach's kiddusha is not valid. Im shel shlucha kadmu, then kiddusha kiddushin, and her kiddusha is not valid. In Einam Yodim, what do? Is Shneim Nosen get the man who is Makadesh through the wife herself, the man who is Makadesh through the Shliach, both have to give a get, Rotzu, if they make Haskama that Echad Nosen get, Echad Kones, that's one. So that leads us here to the Gemara, which Amir Hashem will learn tomorrow. We said at 1 p.m., correct? That would, did I get that right? Tomorrow.
Yeah, perfect.
Right, Tuesday.
1 p.m.
And Amir Hashem
Tuesday.
At 3:50. Okay then?
Excellent.
All right.
We're in agreement.
Thank you so much.